Right. Made it back for day 14. Man, 2 weeks of doing this. Still on Steve Jobs. Um, we are almost halfway. It's gonna be a journey through this book. Um, Last night was a very quick one. Um, had some other things on my mind I had to tend to, but um, left off chapter 18. We're in the chapter where Steve he went ahead and started his new adventure. But he needed Apple to approve on him to use Frog Design, the same person that he prevented Wozniak from using when he wanted to create a remote control. Talking about how it was gonna veer on Apple products as a remote control versus computer, but he's going from computer to another computer company and still. His reasoning was that if they have access to the same designer, the designer will be able to make it look different. But either way, we left off on page 223. Um, it was a writing from Joe Esquire. I mean, from Joe from Esquire, and he captured Jobs' intensity at Nexus staff meeting. But gonna hop right into it. It's day 14 of becoming more well read. If you've just been trying to read more, feel free to pull up a chair and tap in with me. Um, but yeah, this is what Joe Nacero writes. It's not quite right to say that he is sitting through this staff meeting because Jobs doesn't sit through much of anything. One of the ways he dominates is through sheer movement. One moment he's kneeling in his chair, the next moment he's slouching in it. The next he has leaped out of his chair entirely and is scribbling on the blackboard directly behind him. He is full of mannerism. He bites his nails. He stares with unnerving earnestness at whoever is speaking. His hands, which are slightly and inexplicably yellow, are in constant motion. What particularly struck Nocera was Jobs' almost willful lack of tact. He's not very tactful. He's not. How are you doing today? Doing fine. Cool. Now that you're doing fine, let's go ahead and can we try to get this product done? There's no how you doing this. Hey, piece of shit, let's get this done. You got 2 hours. Reality distortion. Check it out. Um, his willful lack of tact. It was more than just an inability to hide his opinions when others said something he thought dumb. It was a conscious readiness, even a perverse eagerness to put people down, humiliate them, show he was smarter. When Daniel Lewin handed out an organization chart, for example, Jobs rolled his eyes. These charts are bullshit, he interjected. Yet his mood still swung wildly as at Apple. A finance person came into the meeting and Jobs lavish praise on him for a really, really great job on this. The previous day, Jobs had told him this deal is crap. One of Nexus first 10 employees was an interior designer for the company's first headquarters in Palo Alto. Even though Jobs had leased a building that was new and nicely designed, he had it completely gutted and rebuilt. Walls were replaced by glass. The carpets were replaced by light hardwood flooring. The process was repeated when Next moved into a bigger space in Redwood City in 1989. Even though the building was brand new, Jobs insisted that the elevators be moved so that the entrance lobby would be more dramatic. As a centerpiece, Jobs commissioned I.M. Pei to design a grand staircase that seemed to float in the air. The contractor said it couldn't be built. Jobs said it could, and it was. Years later, Jobs would make such staircases a feature at Apple's signature stores. So it sounds like his job was really like design, product design, take computers and design them into a smaller computer, put them into that pocket. But right now we're obviously seeing him in the stage where he's just focused on design of what we have right here now. Let's tweak this, make this a little bit better. All right, let's throw that out there. Let's tweak that, make that a little bit better. Throw that out there. Throw this out there. Tweak. Throw this out there. Tweak. 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 But everything has to be tweaked for Jobs. As we can see, he had the Willy Wonka factory where all the floors or something was white. or whatever. The expensive equipment was colored like a candy apple. But the computer. During the early months of Next, Jobs and Daniel Lewin went on the road, often accompanied by a few colleagues, to visit campuses and solicit opinions. At Harvard, they met with Mitch Caper, the chairman of Lotus Software, over dinner at Harvard's restaurant. When Caper began slathering butter on his bread, Jobs asked him, "Have you ever heard of serum cholesterol?" Caper responded, "I'll make you a deal. You stay away from commenting on my dietary habits, and I will stay away from the subject of your personality." It was meant humorously, but as Caper later commented, human relationships were not his strong suit. Lotus agreed to write a spreadsheet program for the next operating system. Jobs wanted to bundle useful content with the machine, so Michael Hawley, one of the engineers, developed a digital dictionary. He learned that a friend of his at Oxford University Press had been involved in the typesetting of a new edition of Shakespeare's works. That's that meant that that meant that there was probably a computer tape he couldn't get his hands on, and if so, incorporate it into the Nexus memory. So I called up Steve, and he said that would be awesome, and we flew over to Oxford together. On a beautiful spring day in 1986, they met in the publishing house's grand building in the heart of Oxford, where Jobs made an offer of $2,000 plus 74 cents for every computer sold in order to have the rights to Oxford's edition of Shakespeare. It will be all gravy to you, he argued. You will be ahead of the parade. It's never been done before. They agreed in principle and then went out to play skittles over beer at a nearby pub where Lord Byron used to drink. By the time it launched, the next would also include a dictionary, a thesaurus, and the Oxford Dictionary of Quotations, making it one of the pioneers of the concept of searchable electronic books. Instead of using off the shelf chips for the next, Jobs had his engineers design custom ones that integrated a variety of functions on one chip. That would have been that would have been hard enough, but Jobs made it almost impossible by continually revising the functions he wanted it to do. After a year, it became clear that it would be a major source of delay. He also insisted on building his own fully automated and futuristic factory, just as he had for the Macintosh. He had not been chastened by he had not been chastened by that experience. This time too, he made the sim- he this time too he made the same mistakes, only more excessively. He didn't learn from his mistakes. Machines and robots were painted and repainted as he compulsively revised His color scheme. Willy Wonka and the candy apple machines. He trying to do it over and over again. But this is why they hired Scully over at Apple to prevent this. But he never even stepped into that role. He just kept, yeah, Steve, yeah, Steve. Me and you are the leaders. We the voice. And boom, machines and robots were painted and repainted as the compulsively as he compulsively revised his color scheme. The walls were museum white as they had been at the Macintosh factory, and there were $20,000 black leather chairs and a custom made staircase, just as in the corporate headquarters. He insisted that the machinery on the 165-foot assembly line be configured to move the circuit boards from right to left, as they got built, so that the process would look better to visitors who watched from the viewing gallery. Empty circuit boards were fed in at one end at who? Empty circuit boards were fed in at one end and 20 minutes later, untouched by humans, came out the other end as completed boards. The process followed the Japanese principle known as Kanban, in which each machine performs its task only when the next machine is ready to receive another part. Jobs had not tempered his way of dealing with employees. He applied charm or public humiliation in a way that in most cases proved to be pretty effective, Tribble recalled, but sometimes it wasn't. One engineer, David Paulson, put in 90-hour weeks for the first 10 months at Next. He quit when Steve walked in one Friday afternoon and told us how unimpressed he was with what we were doing. Wow. When Business Week asked him why he treated employees so harshly, Jobs said it made the company better. Part of my responsibility is to be a yardstick of quality. Some people aren't used to an environment where excellence is expected. But he still had his spirit and charisma, There are plenty of field trips, visits by keto masters, and off-site retreats. So I mean, sounds like for the most part he's one of those hard coaches where y'all gonna have a tough practice. Y'all gonna get on that line. Y'all gonna dive. Y'all gonna play very tough. But y'all are gonna be very tough to deal with as you get to the market and you get to those other games later on in the season because y'all have dealt through so much adversity with that coach and in practice that the games just become easy. So it's like I get where Steve is coming from to that degree. He's not gonna be one of those coaches that, yeah, buddy, sit down, let me hear about today. Da, da, da. He gonna figure out whatever needs to get you going. Like he'll say whatever he need to say. Your mama, your daddy, and grandmama, they all some bop bop bops. Cause you out here playing like a bop bop bop. It might not feel the best, but you'll probably try a little harder and you'll give it effort a little bit more than if he were to say, please, da 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 da. Push versus pull. That's it. Um, he still exuded the pirate flag spunkiness. When Apple fired Chiat/Day, the ad firm that had done the 1984 ad and taken out the newspaper ad saying "Welcome IBM," seriously, Jobs took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal proclaiming "Congratulations, Chiat/Day." Seriously, because I can guarantee you there's life after Apple. Perhaps the greatest similarity to his days at Apple. So yeah, it sounds like he doesn't even care. Like if he's yeah, it doesn't really sound like he cares if he's the good guy or the bad guy. You know how people say like you got cut like good publicity and bad publicity, but they don't care because all publicity is good publicity. It seems like he goes that degree. Like, yeah, let's just send a little shot out there towards Apple. Like nothing to do with products, but let's get our name buzzing. Let's get people wondering what we're gonna do next, what we're gonna drop next. It's all a circus act because they're not the best phone. There's probably another phone out here that's better, but we don't know about it because it's not marketed as good as. Okay. Perhaps the greatest similarity to his days at Apple was that Jobs brought with him his reality distortion field. It was on display at the company's first retreat at Pebble Beach in late 1985. Their Jobs pronounced that the first Next computer would be shipped in just 18 months. It was already clear that this date was impossible, but he blew off a suggestion from one engineer that they be realistic and plan on shipping in 1988. If we do that, the world isn't standing still. The technology window passes us by, and all the work we've done, we have to throw down the toilet, he argued. Joanna Hoffman, the veteran of the Macintosh team, who was among those willing to challenge Jobs, did so. Reality, reality distortion has motivational value, and I think that's fine, she said as Jobs stood at a whiteboard. However, when it comes to setting a date in a way that mm, However, when it comes to setting a date in a way that affects the design of the product, then we get into real deep shit. Jobs didn't agree. I think we have to drive a stake in the ground somewhere. And I think if we miss this window, then our credibility starts to erode. What he did not say, even though it was suspected by all, was that if their targets slip, they might run out of the money. Run out of money. Jobs had pledged $7 million of his own funds, but at their current burn rate, that will run out in 18 months if they didn't start getting some revenue from shipped products. 3 months later, when they returned to Pebble Beach for their next retreat, Jobs began his list of maxims with the honeymoon is over. By the time of the third retreat in Sonoma in September 1986, the timetable was gone, and it looked as though the company would hit a financial wall. Okay. That reality distortion. So some of that reality distortion comes from constraints that he has that other people don't have. Like, forget what y'all talking about. Like, it's not possible. I got rent due. Like, it gotta be possible. We gotta make it possible. And I'm gonna be the yardstick to make it possible. to the rescue. In late 1986, Jobs sent out a proposal to venture capital firms offering a 10% stake in Next for $3 million. Dollars. That put a valuation on the entire company of $30 million, dollars, a number that Jobs had pulled out of thin air. Less than $7 million dollars had gone into the company thus far, and there was little to show for it other than than a neat logo and some snazzy offices. It had no revenue for or products, nor any on the horizon. Not surprisingly, the venture capitalists all passed on the offer to invest. So he spent all this money on staircases and coloring the factory. No products. But I mean, shoot, that's what a lot of people get stuck on. Like even Steve Jobs, someone that made probably one of the greatest inventions that we use to this day. Um, he still gets stuck in moments where um, that theorizing and that mental procrastination, that mental stimulation is enough, or not even enough, but it does something to your brain where it feels like you're checking off, like you're making progress. Like yeah, like look at it, we got the staircases, we got the nice logo, like we look like something. I got the plan, I got the goals. They're written down on the whiteboard. They're written down on my mirror. They're written down wherever. And what have we done to achieve that goal? You know what I'm saying? Have we put together any ideas? Are we writing stuff on that mirror? Are we coming up with ideas on that mirror? And then when we do come with those ideas, how are we trying to put those ideas into fruition? What steps can we take to put those ideas to fruition? Um, but yeah, so it's interesting. So now he's gonna reach out to venture capitalists, and they're willing to put their money in, but they're gonna be more similar to Scully. Like, yeah, we're gonna put our money in, but like we're gonna make sure our money is, we need to show us something where our money is doing. Like, what is our money doing? A logo that doesn't work for us, that doesn't create any cash flow. What is our money doing? What is our money going? Where, like, you know what I'm saying? So that gives him a little like I know he said he's the yardstick for excellence, but even Steve needs a yardstick to kind of keep him progressing. Um, in late 1986, okay, so all the venture capitalists all passed on the offer to invest. There was, however, one cowboy who was dazzled, Ross Perot, or Perot, the Bantam Texan who had founded Electronic Data Systems, then sold it to General Motors for 2.4 billion dollars. In 1980, what? 2.4 billion dollars. Happened to watch it, then sold it to General Motors for 2.4 billion dollars. Happened to watch a PBS documentary, The Entrepreneurs, which had a segment on Jobs and Next in November 1986. He instantly identified with Jobs and his gang, so much so that as he watched them on television, he said, "I was finishing their sentences for them." It was a line eerily similar to one Scully. See what I'm saying? He needs a Scully. One Scully had often used. Perot called Jobs the next day and offered, "If you ever need an investor, call me." Jobs did indeed need one badly, but he was careful not to show it. He waited a week before calling back. Perot sent some of his analysts to size up Next, but Jobs took care to deal directly with Perot. One of his great regrets in life, Perot later said, was that he had not bought Microsoft or a large stake in it when a very young Bill Gates had come to visit him in Dallas in 1979. By the time Perot called Jobs, Microsoft had just gone public with a $1 billion valuation. So dang, Gates ended up surpassing Jobs. Wow. Perot had missed out on the opportunity to make a lot of money and have a fun adventure. He was eager not to make that mistake again. Jobs made an offer to Perot that was 3 times more costly than had quietly been offered to venture capitalists a few months earlier. For $20 million, Perot would get 16% of the equity of the company, and Jobs put in another 5 million. After Jobs put in another 5 million, that meant the company would be valued at about 126 million. But money was not a major consideration for Perot. After a meeting with Jobs, he declared that he was in. "I picked the jockeys, and the jockeys picked the horses, and ride them." He told Jobs, "You guys are the ones I'm betting on, so you figure it out." type. Perot brought to Next something that was almost as valuable as his $20 million lifeline. He was a quotable, spirited cheerleader for the company, who could lend it an air of credibility among grown-ups. In terms of a startup company, it was one that carries the least risk of any I've seen in 25 years in the computer industry. He told the New York Times. We've had some sophisticated people see the hardware. It blew them away. Steve and his whole Next team are the darndest bunch of perfectionists I've ever seen. Perot also traveled in rarefied social and business circles oh my goodness. Perot also traveled in rarefied social and business circles that complemented Jobs' own. He took Jobs to a black tie dinner. He took Jobs to a black tie dinner dance in San Francisco that Gordon and Ann Getty gave for King Juan Carlos, the first of Spain. When the king asked Perot whom he should meet, Perot immediately produced Jobs. They were soon engaged in what Perot later described as an electric conversation, with Jobs animated with Jobs animatedly describing the next wave in computing. At the end, at the end, the king scribbled a note and handed it to Jobs. What happened? Perot asked. Jobs answered, I sold him a computer. These and the other stories were incorporated into the These and other stories were incorporated into the mythologized story of Jobs that Perot told wherever he went. At a briefing at the National Press Club in Washington, he spun Jobs' life story into a Texas-sized yarn about a young man so poor he couldn't afford to go to college, working in his garage at night, playing with computer chips, which was his hobby, and his dad, who looks like a carrot out of a Norman Rockwell painting, comes in one day and says, Steve, either make something you can sell or go get a job. 6 days later, in a wooden box that his dad made for him, the first Apple computer was created, and this high school graduate literally changed the world. The one phrase that was true was the one about Paul Jobs is looking like someone in a Rockwell painting, and perhaps the last phrase, the one about Jobs changing the world. Certainly, Perot believed that. Like Scully, he saw himself in Jobs. Steve's like me, Perot told the Washington Post David Remnick. We're weird in the same way. We're soulmates. Gates and next. So Bill Gates. Very interesting how the I'm gonna stop there, but it's titled Gates and Next, so it's talking about Bill Gates and now just Steve's next venture. But it's similar how Gates was the smaller fish in the pond when bro was at Apple, and he was able to help with a problem for them, and really catapult his way up into that $1 billion valuation to where I don't know how much Apple was worth at this time, but in my head, it sounded like he was worth more than them. I didn't in my mind. It didn't seem like they was worth $1 billion, but he was worth $1 billion. And yeah, so it's cool to see how the little man trajectory passes over the higher man or the bigger man, and then the bigger man is now in a position. I don't know how it's gonna go. We're gonna see on day 15. But yeah, I'm done for now. This was day 14 of becoming more well read. If you tapped in with me, I appreciate it. This is really just a goal for myself to just remain consistent. I've noticed in different ways, in different capacities, that I've been able to become more articulate in my everyday conversations. From doing this, and more aware of my speech structures as I'm going through. I'm finding though that constructing versus we ain't gotta get into that, but there's a lot of things that I'm able to say that are making this experiment here valuable for me, just in the growth aspect. So this is something that I'll continue to do. And as I figure out how to articulate those as well, I'll share with you those, or share with you guys those concepts that are popping up in my head once I'm able to really articulate them to you guys. But outside of that, day 14, as you can see, almost halfway.